most of you probably know, you've been following these things pretty closely. I'm sure if you have a loved one inside. Last week, there were some developments with a bill in the Senate, and a lot of you probably have some questions about that. The bill is called SB 1400, and it got out of the Senate last week. And, we were given very little notice about this bill. We found out about it on Monday. It was listed for a hearing on Tuesday. Well, it was listed on Monday evening. The hearing was Tuesday, and it got out of the Senate on Thursday. So the timeline was very, very quick. It was very rushed. And yeah, I mean, Sean will talk about more about like the dynamics about that bill a little bit later on. But I just wanted to give people an idea of like what's actually in the bill, because you know, it's not a bill that we are supporting, just to be clear. We don't see this as a good bill. So retroactively, what the bill does for people who are currently incarcerated, so inside prison right now, it sets parole eligibility after 35 years, but it also creates exclusions for certain categories of people. Let me see if I can pull these up real quick. So there's exclusions for uh, for killing a law enforcement officer, and if your charge is rape or was it indecent sexual assault? Is that what that ESI means? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So
That's
so it bars people with like those kind of charges completely from seeking parole in SB 1400. And then prospectively for people who have yet to be sentenced, it creates more or less a mandatory 35 to life minimum and an option for life without parole under certain circumstances, like killing a law enforcement officer, um, killing, I think, of an unborn child. Um, let's see. If the defendant caused the death of the victim, so for principals in the homicide, um, and if you killed a child under 13, and if the defendant also committed serious bodily injury, you're eligible to receive a life without parole sentence. There's also a category where you can get a lesser sentence, but it creates a six-part test that's basically impossible to fulfill. And so essentially what the bill is a 35 to life without parole bill going forward. And then going for people inside prison, it's parole eligibility after 35 years, more or less. And so, yeah, so there is a provision saying if you're over 70, you can get out after 20 years. The catch with that, though, is that that really only applies to like 10 people. So, like, they put that in there as, as a, something that I guess looks good. But people over 70 are going to be eligible after 35 years, anyways. So, and for the people that are not, there's only 10 of them. Actually, perhaps less, right? So we already went through those numbers, and that, for those 10 people, great, but it's also like not that many people. So it's not um, a significant, like, I guess, release valve in that way. Does that make sense to people? Um, so with that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Sean Damon, so he can talk a bit more about I guess, the landscape and the circumstances surrounding these bills, what's happening right now in the House, and what we're doing right now. There will be opportunities for questions at the end. So we ask that if you have questions to put them in the chat or hold them until the end of the conversation. So I'll pass it to Sean.
All right. Thanks, Roxanne. And thanks for that breakdown of SB 1400. Tonight, I'm just going to talk a lot about what has been developing in Harrisburg. And, as Roxanne was outlining, right, SB 1400, it's like a very conservative felony murder reform bill that goes to pains to uphold the status quo, was introduced and, quickly passed. And I know this can be a frightening thing when we see a bill like this that contains so many things that would hurt people that we care about advance. It has a lot of things, as Roxanne outlined, that we just absolutely do not support a draconian 35 to life mandatory minimum sentence for most cases, with an option that a judge may sentence um, many of the people in those cases to life without parole. There's a fake escape hatch in the bill for people like lookouts and getaway drivers, people with minimal culpability, that has a burden of proof that is nearly impossible for these accomplices to meet. To the point that it says you cannot have known about the underlying felony. Well, if you didn't know about the underlying felony, you shouldn't be getting charged with second degree murder in the first place, right? So it's a
Man, trying to
horrible,
connect on my
horrible
laptop, but if I
bill.
would have answered you, it would have kicked me off the meeting completely.
Hold on, hold on a second.
Can we mute?
All right. All right. I think gotcha. Okay. So it can be really, this is a horrible bill, and it can be a scary thing to see something like this advance. But there's a few things that I want you all to know about SB 1400 and the dynamics behind it. First off, this was largely created by the Office of Attorney General and Attorney General Dave Sunday, who enlisted the Senate Republicans to run it. Okay. That is why it got introduced and why it ran so quickly. Dave Sunday's political fortunes are rising right now in the Republican Party, and the Senate Republicans wanted to more or less be on his good side, right? So they put this in, they ran it quickly. Second, the Pennsylvania DA's Association is a very powerful association. Every DA in the Commonwealth, except for our DA here in Philadelphia who left, they did not formally support this bill. They sent in a letter supporting aspects of it, of SB 1400. They did not put their full support behind it. The DA's Association is currently split on the matter. There are some in it who want to be more reasonable and find a compromise solution because they are kind of worried about this legislative process falling apart and the kind of burden on their offices of conducting mass resentencings. And there are others who just want to hitch their wagon to something like this bill and hope the Senate Republicans can somehow push it through. So even the DA's Association, oftentimes our main opponents in this, they're not 100% squarely behind this bill right now. Those are important dynamics for y'all to know about. There's a lot of chaos and a lot of disarray in Harrisburg. But the most important thing people to know about this bill is it has no chance to pass into law as it is written. In order for this to pass into law, it's been passed out of the Senate at this point. It must, in the House, get a vote on the Judiciary Committee. And then after passing out of that committee, the majority leader's office must list it for a vote on the House floor. Now, Chairman Briggs, who is the prime sponsor of the bill that we support, HB 443, he chairs the Judiciary Committee, and he said he will not run this bill as it is written out of Judiciary Committee. What's more, so that's one hurdle that it cannot surpass right now. What's more is the majority leader's office has communicated to us and some of our allies that they will not run a bill on the floor unless there is some sort of deal hammered out between key stakeholders, and we count as key stakeholders in this. So I want to assure everyone on this call, there's a backstop to this bill. The only way that this bill would run is if there was some sort of deal worked out that was acceptable to us, and that the bill is so amended and radically, completely rewritten to reflect the substance of that deal. So basically, as this thing exists, no chance of passing, not going to happen. And the only thing that can run in the House again is some sort of deal that is worked out and that is acceptable to us. So now I want to talk to you all about a little bit about like stakeholders and power brokers in Harrisburg. It's important for people to understand that we have been working very hard, pretty much more or less nonstop since late March, since this dropped. And we're in the pressure cooker, right? We had a number of negotiation sessions with the DA's Association where we tried to see if we could reach an agreement, right? Some sort of compromise position. And to date, we have not been able to. Simply put, many in their association, not all of them, but there's many in the association, they want mandatory minimum sentences in most cases. That's not acceptable to us, right? They want a mandatory minimum 2 life sentence in most cases, not acceptable. We're not going to agree to that. We think judicial discretion is key in cases going forward, in most cases going forward, right? So judges can offer a lower sentence for people with diminished culpability, or if the circumstances of the case warrant it, right? So it could either be culpability or there's unique circumstances of the case, mitigating factors, right? Biographical details about the defendant and what led them on this path. Judges should have an ability to make a judgment and to offer a lower sentence if they think it's warranted. Also, secondary cases, this is the real thing. Secondary cases bear more similarity with third degree murder. Well, why is that? Because both of these classes of offenses involve a homicide that was unintentional, right? A third degree murder, which, the legal standard of that, to explain it in just like regular everyday terms, it's like a bar fight that gets out of hand and somebody didn't intend to kill somebody and they accidentally kill them in the course of that fight. That's like a third degree murder. And a second degree murder is basically like that type of scenario. Somebody did not have the intent to kill somebody. They were trying to injure them or trying to incapacitate them in some way and accidentally kill them. But they've committed a felony while doing that. So they're robbing them. There's a struggle over a gun, and the person that's robbing this person like shoots the person in the struggle and kills them, but they didn't actually intend to kill them. Right? It wasn't a planned out murder. Even in that instant, they didn't have the intent to kill. So that is why we take these positions, right? The sentencing for this should be more akin to what third degree is. And third degree right now has a maximum 40-year sentence. That means a judge could give you a 20 to 40, or they could give you a 15 to 30, or they could go anywhere under that. The parole eligibility date is always half the amount of the sentence. So it's 20 to 40, 15 to 30. We think that going forward, the vast majority of cases ought to fit that kind of framework, not a mandatory minimum to life where they can start out 35 to life, drive it up to 55 to life. As we know, that is basically a death by incarceration sentence. Even if you're not calling it life without parole, we're not going to support that, right? So the bottom line is this: the Senate and the Attorney General. Oh, actually, one other detail that people need to know, and this is important for later. The governor's office has gotten involved at this point. They're in the background and they've been talking to various parties, the leadership of the House Dems, the Senate Dems. They've talked to us at this point. They have talked to the DA's Association at this point, probably other people. And they're urging people to compromise, right? They're kind of like trying to push people towards a compromise. But House leadership has made clear they will not run a bill in the end that is not the product of some sort of deal. And again, that last part is key. I'll talk more about that later. But the reality is that for many decades, people like us were shut out of these conversations. Deals were made by power brokers in Harrisburg, and people like us just had to be expected to compromise on every point that the power brokers wanted compromise on. But today, that is not the way anymore. In this moment, we have a voice and we have some power. We are working with a broad coalition. There are, people in the public defender community who have been tremendous in this effort. There are other criminal justice reform nonprofits who have really stepped up and really are kind of amplifying our power and really, helping to navigate the space. And with our progressive elected allies in Harrisburg as well, it gives us this foot in the door. So in this moment, if there is a deal to be struck, it has to involve us. The other side cannot just dictate the terms to us. They're going to have to compromise if they want to reach a deal and if we want to pass something. It really remains to be seen, right, if that is possible. We are working nonstop to get something done. We are not going to agree with something that puts people in a worse spot than mass resentencings. And because we already went through mass resentencings in Pennsylvania with the juvenile lifers, we can see what that looks like, right? The people in our coalition are reasonable people. They're grounded people, but they're not going to compromise on a new law going forward that does not contain some tangible benefit for people who are currently incarcerated, right? If there's going to be a compromise, they're going to have to do something to help people out who are already in, right? It's not going to be just everybody giving stuff away to the other side to uphold their status quo agenda. So every one of you should know that we are going to keep navigating the halls of power, and we're going to keep pushing with everything we've got to try and get something passed that is fair and just. But if the other side doesn't want to compromise, we are going to shift our efforts to preparing for mass resentencings and fighting to see that they are fairly funded and the public defenders who will do most of those resentencings have the resources they need. One way or another, we know this, and this is what I'm going to close with. People who are sentenced to die in prison, who have turned around their lives, are coming home, right? Point blank. That is going to happen. It's just a matter of how soon and whether it happens through the legislature or the courts. But we know that one way or another, when we fight, we win. So we're doing everything we can. We're leaving it all on the field. And in a little bit later, there's some other folks in our organization that are going to break down ways that you can apply your muscle to this effort and try to help push the decision makers to get something done in Harrisburg that brings our people home. But before I pass it off to the next people on the agenda, Roxanne, did I miss anything? Is there anything that you feel like you need to fill in on those dynamics?
I don't think so. I think it's a pretty good summary. And I think maybe we'll get to some other stuff in the questions, but I think we can pass it on to John now to talk about some next steps. Yeah, can we spotlight John?
Can you all hear me, even if I'm not spotlighted? Yeah, cool. Um, yeah, so I mean, we heard the updates recently, and I think in a lot of ways, this is the outcome, or this kind of situation that we're at now is something that was going to happen at some point. Um, the Republicans have sort of said where they're going to stand, and we're going to try to push, the folks that we have influence over as much as possible. But yeah, just like as we've always anticipated, we're going to need to keep pushing on these issues, on these decision makers. So first thing I want to invite everybody to do is, in addition to people can keep dropping questions in the chat now. We'll do question and answer stuff after this. So please, anything that came up during this or afterwards, go ahead and drop them. But yeah, the first thing we're gonna ask folks to do, or invite you all to participate in, is next week on Wednesday, July 8th, we'll have a call-in day. Like Sean mentioned, things are kind of moving really quickly right now, and we're not exactly sure who's going to be the best person to push on come next week, right? We're not sure who's going to stand in the way of this bill. So we wanted to be able to have a time where folks can come together and both learn about who that person is and then go and push them, right? Just knowing that sometimes that can be a little easier to get it done if you can do it with other people. Folks can also, we'll release who some of the targets will be on the day, and folks can call on their own time if you're working or can't make the particular time that we're getting together. But yeah, next week on Wednesday, July 8th at I think 2 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Some of us will host a Zoom, give you all the updates about what we're hearing as far as this bill goes. And people can go into another room and Zoom and make the call yourself. But we'll also be recording, not as an audio video recording, but taking notes on those calls just to know how much pressure we have done and to be able to see where we need to maybe put more. So that's the one thing that's specific for this week. That'll be a one-off. We've done a few of those throughout these couple of weeks, or these couple of months rather. And also just inviting folks like we always do. For years now, we've had the Free Our People Coalition, which is made up of a bunch of different groups that are working on DBI, death by incarceration, life without parole issues, to just make sure that every single legislature, whether they're new, whether they've been around for 20 years, whether they're Republican, Democrat, gets visits about these issues and constantly knows that they're on the hook for fixing these unjust death by incarceration sentences. So Liz just dropped it in the chat. And that's a good spot for anybody, whether you've been doing lobbying for years or whether you've never done it. It's a place where we do tons of lobbying, right? We're constantly going on different visits throughout the year, not just about second degree, when it's not second degree time. First degree is also a priority. Work on the geriatric and medical parole bills as well. But yeah, that's a place where we'll go and do all those visits, but also folks can come by and learn how to lobby, learn what's most effective, can link up with other people, get questions asked. That meets once a month, and it's also just a network for people doing visits all the time. So always encourage people to go to that. It's a good first stop off for any of these things. And it's also super low pressure. You're not committing to doing anything by just coming by one of those meetings. If folks want to do just kind of a simple step to try to get more involved, try to stand up for your loved one, the person you're supporting inside, you can come on by there. Looking through the screen here is a bunch of people that are already involved, have already lobbied, that are on here. And yeah, hopefully a bunch of folks that can join up soon. The other thing we want to mention is, we're still in the midst of the legislative fight, and there's lots of reasons that we heard for pushing for a legislative solution now and not have this go to the next step. But we're also trying to prepare, since the 120 days is up at the end of this month, for what might happen and how to get people ready for resentencings as they do come along. And one of the steps we're taking for that is in some counties that aren't Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, where we already have the ability to organize, mobilize, put some pressure on DAs, talk with the defenders about how they're going to prep for this, and work with family members and people who are currently incarcerated on making sure they're feeling ready and comfortable and prepared for that. In Philadelphia and Allegheny County, we feel pretty confident in our abilities to do all that. But in some of these other counties that have a lot of people, there's not necessarily that infrastructure there. So we're working this month to try to plan some events and to try to do some organizing in 4 other places that have a lot of second-degree cases coming up. And that is Harrisburg and York. We'll do those 2 together. I think there's something like 100 second-degree resentencings that would happen there between those 2 counties. More if you count the counties that are next to them, like Cumberland County and so forth. Going to do one in Lehigh Valley as well. See a couple folks from Lehigh Valley on here. And also probably do something Reading and Lancaster together. I know they're not exactly together, but between the 2 of them, a few folks, Berks and Lancaster County. And then one up in Northeast Pennsylvania that Liz and Carrie will be hosting. And the idea behind those, just briefly, we'll talk about this in other sessions as well, is we want to be able to get local folks together who are interested in volunteering, interested in putting in time to build relationships with people who will be resentenced, and can also work with the public defenders or other systems, preparing them for resentencings. And also, since a lot of folks will be coming home after these resentencings, to help to, prepare as much as we can for people's reentry and getting them support and networks, getting them involved in our anti-carceral movements as well. And we'll also figure out what needs to be done to work with the entities I mentioned before, public defenders, put some pressure on the district attorneys in those areas. And that's going to be particularly important in a lot of those smaller counties or counties like Berks or Lancaster that are pretty conservative and have sort of tough on crime oriented prosecutors. We can't just let them, without any kind of pressure or pushback, start to give out really excessive sentences. So that's the moves that we'll start to make probably once the 120 days pass up, and maybe in September or so, we're going to start to have these events to get some activity going. And yeah, if there's other folks who are interested in maybe doing something like that in other counties that you're from, that you might have to be supporting people through, you can let me know. You can drop something in the chat right now. I think we'll only be able to really try to organize things, like as in the folks that work with us directly for these handful of counties, but there's a simple playbook that we're happy to try to share with people and recruit some other volunteers too. And the only other thing want to mention is, in the event that legislation doesn't pass and we are starting to think about these legal avenues, probably the next session that we would have like this would be a little bit more focused on some of the legal stuff. We'll have some of the lawyers come to break down, what might happen at the next stages of the higher courts. And we can also distribute some handouts and stuff so that people understand now what would be the steps that would need to happen to get to your loved one being in whatever county courthouse having a resentencing hearing. So that's not scheduled yet since everything is so unpredictable now. We want to make sure that, yeah, we're not scheduling something too soon or too late. And, once we're pretty sure the legislature is not going to happen in this period, then we'll start to inform folks about that. But yeah, there's a ton of info that's already there about the legislative push, and the folks are learning for the first time, or maybe for the 500th time, but it's still a lot to take in. And yeah, kind of don't want to start having everybody have to memorize all these different steps for the legal stuff as well. But for now, we are on kind of these two different strategic timelines, with one coming towards a close. So yeah, we'll have these couple of things where we're gonna continue to push on the legislature, both free our people long term, for as long as there's anyone serving a death by incarceration sentence or serving a virtual life sentence. That group's going to be going and going to be doing lobbying, keeping this issue in the halls of Harrisburg. And then we'll just do this one call-in day next week to try to push the second degree stuff specifically, and try to push on whatever our target is. I think it could be the governor, it could be someone who's standing in the way of Democrat leadership. We'll know more next week who the best person to call is. And then the two other things that are a little bit more future oriented and thinking about, if resentencing's happening, what do we need to know about that? How can we help organize in these places that are going to need a lot of help to get good justice?
Thank you, John. So we're going to take some questions now. I see that a lot of the questions are actually being answered in the chat. But I do see that Gigi has her hand up. Seems like she's trying to unmute.
There.
Okay.
I turned I tried to write it in the chat, but my chat wasn't working. First time I'm using this phone. I'm not clear on, I'm with the Prison Society and I work with Jorge inside, and this applies to him at Phoenix. So House Bill 443, when the 120 days is up, what happens?
I mean, they can still pass it. Like, there's nothing precluding the legislator from passing legislation after the 120 days. It just gets a bit more complicated because, like, all of these petitions are probably going to go forward. We know that Derek Lee is going to be resentenced. And then we don't know what the timeline is for the Supreme Court to decide on retroactivity and when resentencings will start. And so, I mean, it could still happen after the 120 days. It just gets more complex, I guess. I mean, is there anything you want to add to that, Sean?
Yeah, just so you know what the game plan is that once the 120 days is up, just like Roxanne said, Derek Lee himself will be resentenced. The legal team that has worked on this in league with a bunch of other lawyers and very, very bright legal minds has prepared a motion that will go in, that will ask the Supreme Court to step back in and not make us go through the whole process of the lower courts again, right? They'll more or less say, hey, you ruled on this, the legislature failed to act. We're asking to be able to come right to you as the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania and for you to make a decision on this matter. I think a lot of people reasonably believe that motion will be accepted. There's a chance that it won't. But because of folks who have watched the dynamics of the Supreme Court and what they've done in this case, we're quite certain that they're going to order mass resentencings. And two, a lot of people are certain that they're going to move fairly quickly on this, that the decision has more or less already been made about what to do if the legislature fails to act. And I think we should see an order from them. You can't put a timeline on it like Roxanne is saying, but I think a lot of people believe they will act within the calendar year.
Yeah, it does really feel like it's getting pushed out. Like since this new bill was, like, it just feels like, we're waiting for it to happen now. And now, timeline.
It
Yeah,
is. It's part of the whole thing.
I
Yeah.
do see a question in the chat related. So, will there still be an organized effort to push HB 443? Yes, I believe we're still going to push for legislation to get passed. That's what I believe. We're not going to give up just because of the 120 days elapses. If there's still a chance we can get it passed, I think we're going to try. Um, yeah, so I'll say yes to that.
The other thing to add too is that no matter what happens with the courts are not going to write a new law, right? For people that will be sentenced to second degree in the future. So that legislative push is still going to happen, which is important to keep in mind for telling loved ones and stuff. If they're hearing about bills being pushed after this, there is a good chance that it's a second degree bill for going forward that's not retroactive, because that conversation is definitely going to continue. Because right now, people can't charge people with that sentence, and prosecutors want to have something on the books so that they can, right? So there is still momentum behind that. And it could get really tricky with people could, after these 120 days, try to still push a bill that is both retroactive. And yeah, I think technically they can do that up until the courts release a ruling, right? That is the new precedent for that. It does handle retroactivity.
Yeah, Nicole, you have your hand up.
Yes. But thank you all for this meeting and providing the what I view as like a transparent overview of what's been going on. So thank you for that. I did want to ask, what does the governor's brokering of the conversations look like? Is the governor's office is communicating to you all and your progressive allies separately from the DAs? Is the governor playing a role in bringing you all together in a meet? No. Okay. That would be too contentious for you all to be in the room together and
No,
try to hammer it
not
out,
at all.
or
Not at
No,
all.
we've had more than 5 meetings with the DAs, like,
Yeah.
without the governor. So
yeah.
It's the governor's office is involved. They're like urging different people to compromise. At this point, they have not been involved long, Nicole. We're talking about less than a week. And they've basically been meeting with different people one to one and just like urging something to get done. That's what it has looked like, and urging people to compromise in different ways. And that's what it looks like. We would love for the governor to support a very, I think fair and just remedy and really to come in and on that side of things. But right now, it does not seem like that's the role that he or his team is playing, if that makes sense.
yeah, I think they have their own ideas of what they would like to see. So like, but we don't have a clarity on that. So they do want people to compromise, but they also have their own agenda as well. So it's a bit complicated. Naima, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. First, I just want to say thank you all for all of your hard work. I greatly appreciate it. Liz kind of answered my question. Well, she did answer the question in the chat, but I just want to make sure I understand. As far as like, and you guys have already said it, you obviously are going to continue to push after the 120 days are up. But as far as if anything possibly could happen before the July 24th deadline, they because I've been watching their live feeds all week. They could possibly like put another day on the calendar if they decided. Okay, I just want to make sure I
Yeah.
understand it correctly. Okay.
Yeah, the budget hasn't been passed yet, so they have to come back in.
Okay.
So like it's still possible to get something passed in that, before the 24th. And we're still going to try to do that. It's true we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
But it's definitely still possible. I mean, like we just saw the Senate pass a bill in 4 days, right?
Yeah.
And so if they really want to do it, they can do it.
But
it's whether they actually really want to do it, I think is the question.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
and what it and also good on you for paying that level of attention about what's going on in Harrisburg. It's like important,
Yeah.
But you should know, and everybody should know the dynamics of like once a budget is passed, they're out for the summer, right? It's
Right.
not even just the deadline, right? It's like once that gets passed, they're out. They're not going to come back. like even if it's next, say hypothetically it was next week, they would just be out for the summer. They'd be back in September. We'd go past the deadline. And then, another thing, I said this earlier, but it just really is the shape of it, is this really is going to come down to how much the DAs want to avoid mass resentencings. We're a very reasonable coalition we're with. It involves people in the defender community, different criminal justice reform nonprofits are very reasonable people. Um, and, HB 443 is a very reasonable bill, right? It's already in some ways a compromise bill, versus the kind of things that people like us would like to see, which would be a second look after, after a much shorter amount of years than 25 years for sure. But, the question will be, how much do they want to avoid mass resentencings, the strain on their offices, all the kind of things that they're going to put people through in the process. And I think that's what it's going to come down to.
Does the House members have that much like tenacity to do anything at all?
We believe their preference is not to, but we can make them do it, like if there's enough pressure.
Okay, thank you.
And it's like there's a lot of House members that want to do something.
Yeah.
It's sort of like the leadership at this point has taken a certain kind of posture in the whole thing. But in some ways that's good for us, because right now they're not going to move anything that's not part of a deal, right? So that's important for us.
Yeah. Karima, I see your hand is up.
Hello, and I just want to say thank you for all that you're doing. I saw that Senate Bill 1400 is stating that if someone goes up for parole and they do get denied, they would have to wait 5 years to be, well, I guess they could put an application in, but technically the parole board will not have to see them for another 5 years. My concern is when someone's actually still pursuing actual innocence in the PCRA court, and parole would possibly say, well, you're not accepting responsibility, and give you a denial. Now that person is waiting possibly 5 years to be seen again, while still trying to go through the PCRA courts. So I didn't know if that was something House Bill 443 would try to steer away from, or
I can't
address, or
that's not currently in. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's not in 443, but I can also like speak to this in the particulars, because that same guidance existed for the juvenile lifers that were going up for parole, right? They could currently get up to a 5-year hit. In practice, what that often meant is that people would get a hit and they would be able to be seen in 1 year or 2 years, right? Just like you laid out, it wasn't that they couldn't accept an application, but it's that they wouldn't have to be seen in 5 years. But, there are a lot of people that did have innocence claims that were able to navigate the process successfully. And you need to know that however this gets resolved, whether it's a bill or whether it's through the courts and people are getting resentenced, there's going to be a lot of support to help people prepare in the parole process. There's going to be a lot of people that step up to kind of help people in that process, as well as people who are currently incarcerated, assisting each other. But I definitely want to let you know it's not always the case that people that had a PCRA in or were pursuing, exoneration or kind of wrongful conviction claim were denied. A lot of people were able to kind of narrate things in a different way. They could show all the programming they did. They could talk about different ways that they thought about how they changed themselves in their lives without admitting to something that they didn't do, but talking about just how they had turned their lives around in general, if that makes sense.
yes, thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, going once. Oh, here we are. Elaine.
I was just wondering, Joanne McClinton seems to be hiding. Is that the right word? I mean, she just has not been very present in any of these bills, or so what's going on with her?
That's a good question, Elaine. We're not really sure.
You should give her a call. You should give her a call.
But you're right, she has not been very present.
Okay.
Nicole.
So have you all done a whip count on HB 443? Is there a chance that that would get voted through the House as like the House's response?
Certainly, it would be very difficult for it to get voted through the House, as is. As you know, the Democrats only have a one-person majority, and we know at least one person in the Democratic caucus is not going to vote for it, and which is a problem. And we don't think that Dem leadership has, like right now, the will to whip that person. So, I mean, one thing that also happened this week is that person, Frank Burns, also introduced a co-sponsorship memo that was basically his intention to introduce SB 1400 in the House.
And he's a Democrat.
He's a Democrat, yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And with that said, in the past, like with HB 150, we have been able to whip some Republicans. It just might be a little harder in this situation since the Senate Republicans have polarized on it. But
Yeah.
we don't know that that's, for instance, there is a Republican that has co-sponsored 443. And recently he was talking about still supporting it. So we might be able to peel off a few folks on the other side. It's just we won't actually have the opportunity to do that kind of whip count until something is out of committee, because that's when the conversation really heats up and you can really ask those hard questions of the Republicans and then get someone to hard confirm them who's on the inside, who can be like, they're not going to lie to me because of XYZ reason. And, we won't have that opportunity until we get something out of committee.
Yeah, I do believe it's going to be harder to get Republicans to vote in favor of it just because the Senate did move first and it's a Republican bill. And so it's very possible the minority in the House would whip their caucus against it just for that reason. And so we're not like starting from a place where it's fresh. It's become more of like a political issue in that way. So I think, it would be a lot more difficult to get Republican votes, even though there might be one or two that would still peel off because they really believed in it. I just think it would be harder.
Just one last question. Do you all have like a Republican lobbyist or like a conservative coalition who backs your position?
Mm-hmm.
We have a Republican lobbyist.
Yep, who's been helping us navigate a lot of stuff. He's been great. And we do have some conservative allies for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think the issue, and actually Roxanne and Wispy, I can confirm this better than I'll say it, but it just seems like the Republicans got organized on this and the Democrats, they kind of organize themselves top to bottom, and the Democrats can't do that, which is disappointing that they're able to come up with their harsh bill and Democrats can't find a response.
Okay,
That's right.
I lied about my last question. Have you all heard anything about Arnold Ventures?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're familiar with them. They're in the mix. They're in the mix.
And they spoke to the
more in the background, but yeah, we know that they're active around this for sure.
Are they looping you in on it?
We haven't been coordinating with them directly, but we've talked with them in the past and definitely, we appreciate what they do. It's just a different lane of work than the kind of direct legislative advocacy. It's more in kind of convening conversations and kind of influence peddling behind the scenes,
Influence peddling behind the scenes. Okay. Because I heard that they actually were in contact with the governor's office.
I'm sure
that they are. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They have a lobbyist named Dennis Giordano who supports their efforts and reaches out to folks. And I wouldn't be surprised if Kevin Ring, who's the head of their criminal justice stuff, had talked to some of the governor's team at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
We also, our lobbyist talked to the governor's team yesterday as well. But the governor, and there's been some other great people, some funders of ours, some other folks that have connections that have spoken directly with Shapiro on this. They didn't really formally get active though, and like I said, until the last week.
Mm-hmm.
that was the first time they talked to House leadership, to Senate minority leadership, that kind of thing.
Anybody else?
Nicole asked this question. Nicole, you can come off mute. I can read it if not. Sorry, other Nicole. But yeah, if this went to mass resentencing, I believe someone said earlier that it would occur during this calendar year. Is there an estimated length of time it would take to do the resentencing for the over 1,000 people? Like I said, I think our next one will focus a little bit more on resentencing, next meeting that we do. But also, yes, it's extremely unlikely to happen during this calendar year because the steps that need to happen right now is a new court. Once the decision goes into effect after the 120 days, the end of this month, Supreme Court has to accept a new petition, and then they have to schedule a new hearing, and then the hearing has to happen, argument has to happen, and then they have to release a ruling. That usually takes a significantly longer amount of time than, a couple months. We don't have any control over when all that happens. So that whole process has to take place before anybody could do any kind of county resentencings. And then the counties are also going to be like a little bit on their own timeline. And that's part of what we'll have to push for them to take care of that in a timely manner too.
Thank you very much. All right. Any final questions? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how to put my hand up. I just put
Okay,
this
Reverend
in.
Art.
I didn't put the
Reverend Art.
It's all
Good to see
good.
you.
It's all good. It's all good. With regards to the resentencing piece and dealing with 1,000 folks that will be put through that process, and of course you have to, as you just explained, John, or y'all just explained throughout the presentation, that would have to happen at various times regarding each county. So we would know how many persons that are in the SLAM who are in each county who would have to apply for the resentencing, and then so we would kind of have to divide that up among ourselves in order to see just how that process will go through, or have we really thought just about how that process would happen if it comes to the resentencing piece?
I mean, it would be similar to what happened with the juvenile lifers, I would imagine, and yeah, I mean,
each
yeah,
county
go ahead.
Sorry, I took your cough as a pause.
Sorry.
Each county has to do their own thing for it though, right? So if you were sentenced in Berks County's got to do the resentencing for you, right? But they're not going to do them in order. It won't be like Philly will do theirs, then Berks does theirs. As soon as the Supreme Court releases their ruling, which will hopefully, order everybody to be resentenced individually, then the counties have to get their act together to do it, right? And like I was explaining before, we don't want to just leave it up in their hands with no kind of pushback or no kind of organizing, especially in the places where there's quite a few people, and places that have, harsher DAs, et cetera, all that. We will want to get something going in those different areas, work with folks there.
So what will happen in the ruling of Derek Lee case? Would his sentencing change be, if any? We don't know what he would be resentenced to, is the answer to that question. The court has to decide that.
It's a good example. His case is from Allegheny County. So
Yeah.
an Allegheny County prosecutor, an Allegheny County, public defender or lawyer, and an Allegheny County judge will be in that courtroom, and they'll decide that new sentence at that hearing, right? And it's not a new trial, all these things, it's just a new sentence, right? They go over what your sentence was, what it should be.
Because everything is moving so quickly, will there be email updates and any meetings before the next? If we have significant updates, I think we might try to schedule another quick Zoom meeting, if it's something significant. If not, we do plan to have our next update in a few weeks, like the same week the deadline is. As soon as we have the information for that, we're going to send it out. But yeah, we'll let people know if there's anything significant before then, for sure.
Yeah, if anybody wants to come by on Wednesday, we can also share any other info. That's for the call-in day next Wednesday, July 8th.
So we got what, 20 days, 19 days left? Something like that.
22 days, I guess.
22 days.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see, y'all. We shall see. Every week it feels like something different, so
Really, every day at this point, we're in the pressure cooker.
yeah.
But like I said earlier, one way or another, we're going to prevail in this situation. It's either going to get taken care of through the legislature, and it's going to get taken care of through the courts. Obviously, we're fighting for this to get taken care of as quickly as possible through the General Assembly. But one way or another, people are coming home.
Yeah. All right, everybody. With that, I guess we'll wish everyone a good night. And I'm sure we'll be talking real soon.
Thank you.
All right, be well, y'all.
Thank
Good to see
you.
you all.
Good night, everybody.
Thank
Thank
Night,
you
Miss
so
Dee
much.
Dee.
Night.